I was 66 years old when I finally learned that love can't be bought. Not with money, not with sacrifice, and certainly not with silence. My name is Eleanor Price, and this is the story of how my own family tried to destroy me and how I destroyed them right back. But before we get there, I need you to do something for me. If you want to see how far a mother will go when pushed past her limit, hit that like button right now and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story travels. Because what happened to me, it could happen to anyone, and it probably already has. Now, let me take you back to the worst birthday party I ever attended. The grape juice hit my dress at exactly 4:47 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon in March. I know the exact time because I was staring at the antique clock on Daniel's mantle when it happened, counting down the minutes until I could politely excuse myself from my grandson Tommy's 8th birthday party. I'd been there for 2 hours already, smiling until my cheeks ached, pretending not to notice that no one had spoken to me except to ask where I'd put the extra napkins I'd brought. I'd bought those napkins myself, of course, along with the decorations, half the food, and Tommy's actual present, a bicycle that cost me $400 I couldn't really spare. The same bicycle that Daniel's wife Carla had looked at with barely concealed disappointment before saying, "Oh, we were hoping someone would get him the gaming system." But I'm getting ahead of myself. The juice was purple, one of those organic, expensive brands that Carla always insisted on buying because she read somewhere that regular juice had too much sugar. The irony wasn't lost on me later. She was worried about sugar, but perfectly fine with letting her daughter humiliate her grandmother in front of 30 people. My granddaughter Sophia was 11 years old enough to know better. That's what I kept telling myself as I stood there, dripping, feeling the cold liquid soak through my dress and into my skin. Old enough to know that you don't accidentally throw an entire cup of juice at someone from 3 feet away while making direct eye contact. The room went quiet for exactly 2 seconds, then someone laughed. I don't even know who it was at first. The sound just erupted from somewhere near the kitchen, high and sharp and cruel. Then someone else joined in, and another, until the whole room was filled with laughter that seemed to bounce off the vaulted ceilings Daniel had been so proud of when he bought this house, the house I'd helped him buy. But we'll get to that. Sophia stood in front of me, her cup still raised, her mouth forming a perfect little O of fake surprise. She looked at her mother. Carla was standing by the gift table, one hand pressed to her mouth, but her eyes were bright with something that definitely wasn't concern. "Oh my God, Mom," Carla said, but she was already turning away, her shoulders shaking. "Sophia, what did you do?" "It was an accident." Sophia's voice was too loud, too theatrical. She looked around the room at all the adults who were still chuckling, feeding off their validation. "I didn't mean to." I stood there in my ruined dress, the nice one I'd bought specifically for this party, the one that had cost me $80 at Macy's because I'd wanted to look presentable for my grandson's birthday, and felt something crack open inside my chest. Not my heart. That had been breaking in slow motion for years. This was something else, something that felt almost like relief. "It's fine," I heard myself say. My voice sounded strange, distant. "It's just a dress." "Here, Eleanor?" That was Daniel's voice, and when I turned, my son was walking toward me with a roll of paper towels, his face arranged in an expression of concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Let's get you cleaned up." He handed me the paper towels, didn't help me, didn't touch me, just handed them over like I was a spill that needed to be managed. And I started dabbing uselessly at the purple stain spreading across my chest. "Sophia, apologize to Grandma," Daniel said, but his tone was mild, almost bored. "Sorry, Grandma." Sophia's voice was sing-songy, completely insincere. She was already turning back to her friends, a group of girls clustered near the snack table, and I could hear them giggling. That's when I caught the words. "Did you see her face?" "I can't believe you actually did it. Your mom said she wouldn't even get mad." "Ism," The paper towels were shaking in my hands, your mom said. I looked up at Carla, who was now very busy rearranging the gift bags, her blonde hair falling forward to hide her face. I looked at Daniel, who had already moved away and was talking to his brother-in-law about something, laughing at some joke I hadn't heard. I looked around the room at all these people, family, friends, neighbors, who had just watched an 11-year-old girl deliberately humiliate me and had laughed. And something inside me that had been bending for years finally snapped clean in half. I need to use the restroom, I said to no one in particular. No one answered. I don't think anyone even heard me. I walked through Daniel's spacious living room, past the professional family photos on the walls where I appeared in exactly none of them, past the kitchen where I'd spent countless hours cooking meals for holidays I was never properly thanked for, and locked myself in the guest bathroom. The bathroom had heated floors, marble countertops, one of those fancy faucets that probably cost more than my monthly social security check. I looked at myself in the mirror. An old woman looked back. 66 years old with grey hair I kept neatly trimmed, wearing a dress that now looked like someone had been murdered in it. My makeup was smudged where I'd been crying without realizing it, and there were paper towels clutched in my shaking hands like weapons I didn't know how to use. When had I gotten so old? When had I become so invisible? When had I become someone my own family thought it was funny to hurt? I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough for someone to knock on the door twice and then give up. Long enough for my legs to start aching from standing still. Long enough for the party sounds to change from chaotic to winding down, parents calling for their kids, the front door opening and closing as people left. Long enough for the truth to finally settle into my bones. They didn't love me. Maybe they never had. The thought should have destroyed me. Instead, it felt like putting down a heavy weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten I was holding it. When I finally came out of the bathroom, the party was over. There were gift bags scattered across the living room, plates of half-eaten cake on every surface, and Tommy was on the couch, playing with his new gaming system, the one Daniel and Carla must have bought him themselves, the one they'd hoped someone else would pay for. Carla was in the kitchen, and I could hear her on the phone. I know, but we could not invite her. She's Daniel's mother. I know. Well, she'll get over it. She always does. I walked past the kitchen without stopping. Daniel was at the front door, saying goodbye to the last few stragglers. He barely glanced at me as I picked up my purse from the hall table. Eleanor, wait, he started, but I was already outside, walking toward my car, the evening air cold against my damp dress. Mom, Daniel caught up to me in the driveway. Look, I'm sorry about what happened. Sophia didn't mean... Yes, she did. My voice was calm, flat. And you know she did. Daniel's jaw tightened. She's 11 years old. She doesn't understand. She understands perfectly. I opened my car door. Your wife made sure of that. What's that supposed to mean? I looked at my son. Really looked at him. When had he started looking so much like his father? Same weak chin. Same eyes that could never quite hold contact when something uncomfortable was being discussed. His father had been a coward too. It means I heard Sophia's friends talking, I said. It means I know Carla told her I wouldn't get mad. It means this wasn't an accident, Daniel. It was a test to see how much you could humiliate me before I finally stopped showing up. That's ridiculous. Is it? I slid into the driver's seat. When was the last time you called me just to talk? Not to ask for money, not to ask me to babysit, not to tell me about some bill you couldn't pay, just to talk. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. That's what I thought, I said, and started the engine. Mom, you're being dramatic. I need you to step back from my car, Daniel. We should talk about this. Step back from my car. He did, finally, his face flushing red. I could see Carla watching from the doorway, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. I drove away without looking back. The drive home took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of staring at the road through a windshield that kept blurring because I couldn't stop crying. 20 minutes of my phone buzzing with texts I didn't read. 20 minutes of the grape juice drying into my dress until it felt like a second skin. 20 minutes for my entire life to rearrange itself in my head. I kept thinking about money. Isn't that stupid? My granddaughter had just humiliated me in front of a room full of people. My son had defended her. My daughter-in-law had probably orchestrated the whole thing. And all I could think about was money. But maybe that's because money was the through line of my entire relationship with Daniel and Carla. Money was the language we spoke. Money was how I'd shown love, because apparently that was the only currency they accepted. I thought about the $75,000 I'd given them over the years. $75,000. I didn't pull that number out of thin air. I knew it exactly because I'd kept records. In a notebook in my desk drawer, I had a list of every loan, every emergency I'd helped with, every time Daniel had called with a crisis that required immediate financial intervention. $5,000 for a down payment on their first apartment. $10,000 when Carla's car died and they needed a replacement right away. $15,000 when Daniel lost his job and they were going to lose everything. $8,000 for Sophia's private school tuition because public school wasn't good enough. $12,000 when they needed new appliances. $3,000 here, $4,000 there, $6,000 for something else I couldn't even remember anymore. And the big one, the house. I had co-signed on their mortgage. $240,000 of debt that I was legally responsible for, even though I didn't live there, didn't benefit from it, and hadn't been properly invited over in months. I drained my retirement savings to help them. I'd cashed in bonds I'd been saving since Daniel was a baby. I'd taken out a reverse mortgage on my own small house, the house my husband had left me when he died, the only thing I had left of him, just to make sure Daniel and his family would be secure. And for what? So my granddaughter could throw juice on me while everyone laughed. So my son could look at me like I was an embarrassment he had to manage. So my daughter-in-law could talk about me on the phone, like I was a burden they couldn't wait to get rid of. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a long time, watching the sun set through the windshield. My house was small, a 2-bedroom ranch in a neighborhood that had seen better days. The paint was peeling, the roof needed replacing, and the fence in the backyard was held together mostly by hope and rust. I could have fixed all of that if I hadn't given everything to Daniel. I could have traveled. I could have actually retired instead of working part-time at the library, just to keep my utilities paid. I could have had something for myself. Instead, I had a stained dress and a phone full of unread messages that I already knew would be full of excuses and accusations disguised as concern. I went inside. The house was quiet. It was always quiet now. I lived alone, had lived alone since my husband died 7 years ago. I'd gotten used to the quiet, mostly. It was better than the alternative. Better than the noise of Daniel's house, where I was ignored even when I was standing right there. I changed out of the dress, threw it in the trash, it was ruined anyway, and sat down at my kitchen table in my bathrobe. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened a bottle of wine. I wasn't much of a drinker. My husband had been, enough for both of us, and I'd spent most of my marriage trying to compensate for his excesses by being careful, controlled, responsible. After he died, I just didn't see the point. Wine was expensive, and I had better things to spend money on, things like my son's mortgage. But I had a bottle in the back of the pantry, something someone had given me for Christmas years ago, and I opened it now and poured myself a glass with shaking hands. The wine was probably terrible. I didn't care. I drank it anyway. My phone was still buzzing. I picked it up and scrolled through the messages. Daniel, Mom, you're overreacting. Can we please just talk about this like adults? Carla, Eleanor, I think you need to apologize to Sophia. She's very upset that you left without saying goodbye. Daniel again. Mom, answer your phone. Carla again. This is exactly why we don't invite you to things. You always make everything about you. I read that last message 3 times. This is exactly why we don't invite you to things. They didn't invite me to things. Past tense, meaning this wasn't the first time, meaning there had been events, gatherings, moments in my grandchildren's lives that I'd been deliberately excluded from, and I'd been too stupid or too desperate to notice. I poured another glass of wine. Then I opened my laptop. I'm not good with computers. I know how to check my email and look up recipes, and that's about it. But I knew how to Google something, and that's what I did now. How to remove yourself as co-signer on a mortgage. The results weren't encouraging. Apparently, you can't just remove yourself from a mortgage. The bank doesn't care if you're being treated like garbage by the people you helped. The debt is the debt, and you're stuck with it unless the other people on the loan refinance or sell the house. I sat back in my chair. Refinancing would require Daniel and Carla to qualify for the loan on their own, which they couldn't do. That's why they'd needed me to co-sign in the first place. Daniel's credit was terrible, and Carla had never held a job for more than 2 years running, which meant my options were stay on the loan and remain financially tied to people who hated me, or force them to sell the house. I poured another glass of wine and kept reading. By midnight, I had a legal pad full of notes and a head full of information I didn't want but desperately needed. I learned about partition actions, legal proceedings that could force a sale of jointly owned property. I learned about financial elder abuse, a term I'd never heard before, but which described exactly what had been done to me. I learned about lawyers who specialized in family disputes and how much they cost. I learned that I had options. I also learned that every option would destroy my relationship with my son. Assuming there was still a relationship to destroy, I must have fallen asleep at the kitchen table, because the next thing I knew, it was morning and my neck was stiff and my phone was ringing. Daniel. I stared at the screen until it went to voicemail. 30 seconds later, he called again. This time I answered. What? Jesus, Mom, finally, I've been trying to reach you all night. I know. There was a pause. Are you okay? No. Another pause, longer this time. Look, we need to talk about yesterday. Yes, we do. Carla thinks. I don't care what Carla thinks. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, gone harder. You know what, Mom? You're right. We should talk. Can you come over this afternoon? No. What do you mean, no? I mean I'm not coming over. Mom, we need to discuss this in person. Then you can come here. I have plans this afternoon. Then we'll talk another time. Mom, or we won't talk at all. Your choice. I hung up. My hands were shaking again, but not from sadness this time. From something else. Something that felt almost like power. He called back immediately. I didn't answer. He called 3 more times over the next hour. I ignored all of them. Instead, I took a shower, got dressed, and drove to the public library. I told you I worked there part-time. What I didn't tell you is that the head librarian, Margaret, had been my friend for 15 years. We weren't close exactly. I didn't really have close friends anymore. Had let them all drift away in favor of being available for Daniel's crises. But we were friendly. We had lunch together sometimes. She knew about Daniel, though not everything. I found her in the back office doing inventory. Eleanor, I didn't expect you today. It's your day off. She stopped when she saw my face. What happened? I sat down in the chair across from her desk and told her everything. Not the sanitized version I usually told when explaining why I couldn't afford to go to the staff Christmas party or why I always picked up extra shifts. The real version. The humiliation at the birthday party, the $75,000, the co-signed mortgage, the years of being treated like an ATM machine by my own son. Margaret listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with every sentence. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You need a lawyer." I know. My sister went through something similar with her ex-husband. I can get you her lawyer's number. Okay. Eleanor, she leaned forward. I want you to understand something. If you do this, if you actually take legal action, your son will never forgive you. I know. I'm not sure you do. Her voice was gentle but firm. Family court is ugly. It's going to get worse before it gets better. They're going to fight you. They're going to try to make you look like the bad guy. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Sophia's face when she threw that juice. The laughter, the way Carla had looked at me like I was something to be managed and mocked. Yes, I said, I'm prepared. That wasn't entirely true. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. But I was about to find out. Margaret's sister's lawyer was named Patricia Vance, and her office was in one of those converted houses downtown that had been turned into professional suites. I called that Monday and somehow got an appointment for Wednesday afternoon. 2 days. 2 days of Daniel and Carla calling and texting, their messages evolving from concerned to angry to threatening. Mom, if you don't respond, we're coming over there. Eleanor, this is childish. Answer your phone. You know what? Fine, don't talk to us. But don't expect us to keep including you in family events if you're going to act like this. That last one almost made me laugh. Including me in family events. Like throwing juice on me was an invitation I should be grateful for. I didn't respond to any of them. Wednesday came and I drove downtown to Patricia Vance's office with my notebook full of records and a stomach full of dread. Patricia was younger than I expected, maybe 45, with sharp eyes and a handshake that could crack walnuts. She sat me down in her office and listened while I went through the whole story again. When I got to the part about the co-signed mortgage, she held up a hand. Wait, you co-signed for the full amount? Yes. And you don't live in the house? No. And they haven't been making the payments on time? I blinked. What? She was already typing something into her computer. When you co-sign, you're equally responsible for the debt, which means the bank reports the payment history on your credit too. Have you checked your credit report recently? No, I didn't think. Patricia turned her monitor around so I could see it. There, in black and white, was my credit score, 580. Below it was a list of late payments, the mortgage, 3 credit cards I didn't even know existed, a car loan for a vehicle I'd never seen. I couldn't breathe. They've been using your information to open accounts, Patricia said quietly. This isn't just family drama, Eleanor. This is fraud. The room felt like it was tilting. I don't understand, I whispered. Why would they? Because you let them. Patricia's voice wasn't unkind, but it wasn't soft either. I'm sorry to be blunt, but at some point you became such an easy source of money that they stopped seeing you as a person. They see you as a resource, and when you started to run dry, they found other ways to access what they needed. I thought I might be sick. What do I do? First, we file a police report. This is identity theft, and it's criminal. Then we start the process of getting you removed from all these accounts and repairing your credit. And as for the mortgage, she paused. That's trickier, but there are options. Tell me. We can demand they refinance in their own names, which they probably can't do, or we can force a sale of the house through legal action. Either way, you get your name off that debt, and either way, they lose the house. Probably yes. I closed my eyes. My son, my grandchildren, the house I'd helped them buy, the life I'd helped them build, gone. Mrs. Price? Patricia's voice cut through my thoughts. I need you to understand something. They did this to themselves, not you. Whatever happens next is a consequence of their actions, not yours. You're just refusing to keep paying for their mistakes. I opened my eyes and looked at her. When can we start? We filed the police report that afternoon. I expected it to feel momentous, signing those papers, giving my official statement to a bored detective who'd probably seen 1,000 cases like mine, but it just felt administrative, like I was reporting a lost credit card or a stolen package. It wasn't until I was driving home that the weight of it hits me. I just filed a police report against my own son. My phone rang. Daniel, again. This time I answered. Mom, what the hell did you do? What are you talking about? Don't play stupid. The police just called me. They said you filed a report for identity theft. So word traveled fast. Yes. Are you out of your mind? You can't. I can actually, and I did. This is because of the birthday party, isn't it? Because you're upset about a stupid accident. This is because you've been opening credit cards in my name, I said, my voice sharp. This is because you've been ruining my credit for years while I sacrificed everything to help you. This is because you're a thief, Daniel. Silence then. How dare you? No, how dare you? and I hung up. He called back immediately. I blocked his number. Carla called. I blocked hers too. Then the really nasty messages started coming through email. You're destroying this family. The kids are crying because you're trying to put their father in jail. I hope you're happy. You've ruined everything. You were always a terrible mother. That last one came from Carla's email address at 11 p.m. on a Thursday night, after I'd apparently ignored 23 previous messages. I read it, sitting in bed, my reading glasses perched on my nose, and felt absolutely nothing. You were always a terrible mother. Maybe I was. Maybe a good mother would have set boundaries years ago. Maybe a good mother would have said no when her son asked for the 10th loan he'd never pay back. Maybe a good mother would have protected herself instead of enabling the people who were destroying her. Or maybe there was no such thing as a good mother. When you were dealing with a bad son, I deleted the email and went to sleep. The next morning, Patricia called. We have a problem, she said. My stomach dropped. What kind of problem? Daniel and Carla are filing a lawsuit against you. For what? Alienation of affection, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and defamation. It's mostly garbage, legally speaking, but it's going to make things complicated. I sat down at my kitchen table. They're suing me. Yes. Their own mother. Yes. Because I reported them for committing fraud. That's about the size of it. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. It was either that or scream. Mrs. Price? I'm fine. I managed. What do? We prepare to fight. And Eleanor? Her voice went serious. This is going to get ugly. Are you sure you want to keep going? I thought about my stained dress in the trash, about Sophia's face, about Carla on the phone saying she always does, about the $75,000 and the ruined credit, and the years of my life I'd spent being small and quiet and grateful for whatever scraps of affection they threw my way. I'm sure, I said, and I was. The lawsuit was filed 3 days later. I was served with papers at the library in front of my co-workers by a sheriff's deputy who looked vaguely apologetic about the whole thing. Margaret sent everyone else on break and sat with me while I read through the complaint. It was worse than I thought. They weren't just suing me for money. They were asking for a restraining order to keep me away from the grandchildren. They were claiming I was mentally unstable, that I'd made threats, that I was a danger to the family. This is insane, I whispered. This is legal abuse, Margaret corrected. They're trying to intimidate you into backing down. It's working. No, it's not, she squeezed my hand, because you're not going to back down, are you? I looked at her, this woman who barely knew me, who had no reason to care about my problems, who was sitting here holding my hand while I fell apart. No, I said, I'm not. Patricia filed our response 2 weeks later. We denied everything naturally, but we also filed counterclaims for the fraud, for the money they'd taken, for the financial abuse they'd inflicted for years, and we included evidence, bank statements, credit reports, emails where Daniel had promised to pay me back next month for loans he'd taken out 3 years ago, text messages where Carla had called me a walking ATM. We had receipts for everything. The first court date was set for 6 weeks out. Those 6 weeks were the longest of my life. Daniel and Carla launched a campaign against me on social media. I didn't have Facebook or any of those platforms, had never seen the point, but people sent me screenshots. Posts about ungrateful parents who abandon their families. Vague posts about elder abuse. Turned around on me as if I were the one abusing them. Photos of Sophia and Tommy looking sad, with captions about how their grandmother had chosen money over family. It was masterful, really. They'd created a narrative where I was the villain and they were the victims, and people believed it. I started getting calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, all of them wanting to know what was going on, why I was doing this to Daniel. I stopped answering the phone entirely. The only people I talked to were Patricia and Margaret. Everyone else could believe whatever they wanted. I was done explaining myself. The night before the court date, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. all the choices I'd made, all the sacrifices, all the years of trying to buy love from people who were never going to give it, I thought about my husband and how he would have handled this, probably badly. He'd never been good at confrontation, had always preferred to drink his problems away rather than face them. I'd spent so much of my marriage compensating for his weaknesses, being strong enough for both of us. And after he died, I'd done the same thing with Daniel, being strong enough, responsible enough, self-sacrificing enough for everyone. And where had it gotten me? Alone in a small house with a ruined credit score and a court date with my own son. But maybe that was okay. Maybe being alone was better than being surrounded by people who only wanted what they could take from you. Maybe I'd been alone all along and I was just now noticing. The thought should have been devastating. Instead, it felt like permission. Permission to stop trying. Permission to stop apologizing for taking up space. Permission to be angry, to be hurt, to be done. I got up, made myself a cup of tea, and sat at my kitchen table until the sun came up. Then I got dressed, drove to the courthouse, and prepared to face my family in court. The courthouse was smaller than I expected. I don't know what I'd been imagining. Maybe something out of a TV show with marble columns and dramatic lighting. Instead, it was just a squat concrete building with fluorescent lights that hummed too loud and linoleum floors that squeaked under my shoes. Patricia met me in the lobby at 8:30. She was wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than my car, and she had 2 assistants with her, both carrying boxes of files. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "I threw up twice this morning," I said. "Does that answer your question?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That's normal. Come on, let's find our courtroom." We walked down a hallway that smelled like old coffee and desperation. Every door we passed had a little window, and I could see people inside. Lawyers, families, defendants. Everyone looked miserable. I was about to join their ranks. Courtroom 3B was at the end of the hall. Patricia held the door open for me, and I stepped inside to find Daniel and Carla already there, sitting at the opposite table with their lawyer. I hadn't seen them in person since the birthday party. 6 weeks, but it felt like years. Daniel looked older. There were new lines around his eyes, and his hair was thinner than I remembered. He was wearing a suit I'd never seen before, probably bought for this occasion, probably on a credit card he couldn't afford. Carla looked perfect, as always. Blonde hair in a sleek ponytail, makeup flawless, wearing a dress that managed to look both expensive and modest at the same time. She'd always been good at appearances. They both looked up when I walked in. Daniel's face went hard. Carla's mouth tightened into a thin line. Neither of them acknowledged me. Fine. I didn't acknowledge them either. Patricia guided me to our table and started arranging files while her assistant set up a laptop. I sat down and folded my hands in my lap to keep them from shaking. All rise. The judge was a woman in her 50s with grey hair and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She looked tired, like she'd already heard 1,000 family disputes today, and ours was just another item on an endless list. "Be seated," she said, settling into her chair. "Case number 2024-CV-8847. Daniel Price and Carla Price versus Eleanor Price. Let's start with the plaintiff's counsel." Daniel's lawyer stood up. His name was Marcus Webb, and Patricia had warned me about him. He specialized in high-conflict family cases and had a reputation for being aggressive. "Your Honor, my clients are here today because they've been the victims of a malicious and unfounded attack by the defendant, Eleanor Price. Mrs. Price has filed false police reports, made defamatory statements, and is now attempting to force the sale of my client's home, the home where their 2 minor children live, all because of a personal grudge stemming from a minor incident at a family gathering." A minor incident. My hands clenched in my lap. "Furthermore," Webb continued, "Mrs. Price has exhibited increasingly erratic behavior over the past several weeks, including threatening communications and attempts to turn other family members against my clients. We're asking the court to grant a restraining order and dismiss the defendant's counterclaims, which are nothing more than an attempt to financially devastate a young family. He sat down. Patricia stood up. Your Honor, I'm going to be very direct. Everything Mr. Webb just said is a lie, and we have documentation to prove it. Mrs. Price didn't file false police reports. She reported legitimate identity theft and fraud, which the police are actively investigating. She hasn't made threatening communications. She simply stopped responding to harassment from the plaintiffs. And she's not trying to devastate anyone. She's trying to protect herself from further financial abuse by family members who have stolen from her for years. The judge held up a hand. I've read the filings from both sides. There are some serious allegations here. Mr. Webb, you're claiming Mrs. Price is mentally unstable and dangerous. What evidence do you have to support that? Webb stood again. We have testimony from family members about her bizarre behavior, Your Honor, and we have these. He pulled out a stack of papers and handed copies to the judge and to Patricia. I watched Patricia's face as she read. Her jaw tightened. What is this? The judge asked. Text messages and emails from Mrs. Price to my clients, Webb said. You'll see a pattern of hostile, accusatory language, including threats to make them pay and to destroy everything they've built. My stomach dropped. I'd never sent anything like that. Never. Patricia was already flipping through the pages, her expression darkening with every sheet. Your Honor, she said, her voice sharp, I need a moment to review these with my client. The judge nodded. 5-minute recess. Patricia grabbed my arm and pulled me out into the hallway. Her assistants followed, and we huddled in a corner while she shoved the papers at me. Did you send these? I scanned the first page. It was an email allegedly from me, sent to Daniel's email address. You think you can just cut me off after everything I've done for you? I'm going to make you pay for this. I'm going to destroy everything you've built, and you'll have no one to blame but yourself. No, I whispered. I would never write something like this. Look at the email address. I looked. It was similar to mine. Same name, but with a period between the first and last name where mine didn't have one. Eleanor.price@gmail instead of eleanorprice@gmail. They faked these, Patricia said. Can they do that? They just did. She was already typing on her phone. This is forgery, and it's incredibly stupid because it's easy to disprove. But in the meantime, it makes you look bad. What do? We prove they're fake. I'm calling our tech expert right now. But Eleanor, I need to know, is there anything at all that you sent that could be twisted to sound threatening? I thought back through all my communications with Daniel and Carla over the past 6 weeks. I told Daniel he was a thief, I said, but that was on the phone, not in writing. Anything else? No. After I blocked their numbers, I didn't communicate with them at all. She nodded. Good, okay. Let's go back in there and call their bluff. We filed back into the courtroom. The judge was already seated, looking impatient. Counselor, she said to Patricia, Your Honor, these documents are fraudulent. The email address is not my client's email address and will be able to prove that definitively with metadata analysis. This is a clumsy attempt at deception, and frankly, I'm shocked that opposing counsel presented these without verifying their authenticity. Webb shot to his feet. Your Honor, these came directly from my clients, who have already proven themselves willing to commit fraud, Patricia cut in. My client has documented evidence of identity theft, including credit cards opened in her name without her knowledge or consent. The police report is a matter of public record, and now the plaintiffs are trying to muddy the waters by fabricating evidence. The judge looked at Webb. Do you have any proof these emails are authentic? We have printouts from my client's email accounts. Anyone can create a fake email address and send themselves messages, Patricia said. That's not proof of anything except that the plaintiffs are getting desperate. I watched the judge's face. She wasn't convinced yet, but she wasn't dismissing us either. Mr. Webb, I'm going to need more than printouts, she said. Mrs. Vance, how long will it take you to get your metadata analysis? 24 hours, Your Honor. The judge made a note. Fine, we'll reconvene tomorrow afternoon to review the technical evidence. In the meantime, let's talk about the restraining order. Mr. Webb, you're asking that Mrs. Price be prohibited from contacting your clients or coming within 500 feet of their home. On what grounds? She's shown a pattern of harassment, Your Honor, that you can't prove, the judge interrupted. Do you have anything else? Any witnesses to threatening behavior? Any documented incidents? Webb hesitated. We have testimony from the minor children that they're afraid of their grandmother. Bring them in, Patricia said immediately. Everyone looked at her. I'm sorry, Webb said. You're claiming the children are afraid. I'd like to hear that directly from them, under oath. Webb's face went pale. Your Honor, these are children. We can't subject them to... Then maybe don't use them as props in your case, Patricia said coldly. The judge leaned back in her chair, studying both lawyers. Then she looked at Daniel and Carla. Mr. Price, Mrs. Price, are your children actually afraid of their grandmother? Daniel and Carla exchanged glances. Carla whispered something to Webb. Your Honor, Webb said, perhaps we should focus on the financial aspects of this case. No, the judge said flatly. You brought up the children. You claim they're afraid. I want to know if that's true or if you're just trying to manipulate this court. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Finally, Daniel stood up. Your Honor, may I speak? The judge nodded. Daniel cleared his throat. The kids aren't afraid of my mother, but they're confused and upset because she's trying to take away our house. They don't understand why their grandmother is doing this to us. Why is she doing this to you, Mr. Price? Daniel blinked. I'm sorry. Your mother filed a police report for identity theft. That suggests you opened accounts in her name without permission. Did you? That's a misunderstanding. It's a yes or no question. Daniel's jaw worked. We may have added her name to some accounts for emergency purposes. Without her knowledge or consent, silence. Mr. Price, I'm going to give you one chance to answer this honestly. Did you commit fraud against your mother? I could see Daniel's hand shaking from across the room. Carla was staring straight ahead, her face blank. We needed help, Daniel said finally. She's my mother. She's supposed to help family. Help is voluntary, the judge said. Fraud is a crime. Mrs. Vance, I'm inclined to deny the restraining order and grant you time to compile your evidence on the counterclaims. Do you need anything else from me today? Patricia stood. Actually, Your Honor, there's one more thing. We'd like to request that Mrs. Price's name be removed from the mortgage on the plaintiff's home pending the resolution of this case. Webb jumped up. Absolutely not. That would trigger an immediate default. That's not Mrs. Price's problem, Patricia said. She's legally liable for a debt on a property she doesn't live in and receives no benefit from. The plaintiffs have demonstrated that they're willing to commit fraud and forgery. My client has every reason to protect herself from further financial entanglement. Your Honor, my clients will lose their home, Webb said. Then perhaps they should have thought of that before committing fraud, the judge said dryly. She made another note. I'm going to table this issue until we resolve the question of the falsified emails. If those turn out to be fake, Mr. Webb, I'm going to be very unhappy with you and your clients. We'll reconvene tomorrow at 2 p.m. Dismissed. The gavel came down. I sat there unable to move. Around me, people were gathering their things. Lawyers were talking. The courtroom was emptying. We'd won. Sort of. At least for today. Patricia was packing up files, giving instructions to her assistants. I watched Daniel and Carla leave, saw the way Carla grabbed Daniel's arm, the angry whispers between them. Webb stopped at our table on his way out. You're making a mistake, he said to Patricia. Am I? This family could reconcile, but you're pushing them toward destruction. Patricia looked at him for a long moment. Mr. Webb, this family destroyed itself years ago. We're just cleaning up the mess. He walked away. Patricia turned to me. Let's get out of here. We went to a coffee shop 2 blocks from the courthouse. Patricia ordered something complicated with extra espresso, and I got tea I didn't drink. That went better than expected, she said. Did it? The judge saw through their bullshit. That's a win. I wrapped my hands around my mug. They were still shaking. They faked emails from me. Yes, that's insane. That's actually insane. That's what happens when desperate people feel cornered. Patricia pulled out her laptop. I've already got our tech guy working on the metadata. By tomorrow, we'll have proof those emails are fake, and then the judge is going to crucify them. And then what? She looked up from her screen. What do you mean? I mean, what happens after we prove they lied? What happens to Daniel and Carla? That depends on what the judge decides. But Eleanor, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that your son could face criminal charges. Fraud, forgery, identity theft. These aren't small crimes. I stared at my tea. He's my son. I know. I don't want him to go to jail. I know that too. Patricia's voice was gentle. But this isn't about what you want anymore. The police are involved. The courts are involved. This is out of your hands. It was never in my hands, I said quietly. That's the whole problem. We sat in silence for a while. Around us, the coffee shop buzzed with normal people having normal days. Students studying, couples on dates, someone having a business meeting in the corner. All of them living lives that didn't include suing their own children. Can I ask you something? I said. Of course. And do you have kids? Patricia hesitated. No. Do you have family? Not really. My parents died when I was young. I have a sister I talk to maybe twice a year. So you don't know what this feels like? No, she admitted. I don't, but I know what it looks like when someone is being abused. And I know what it looks like when someone finally decides to fight back. That's what you're doing, Eleanor. You're fighting back. It doesn't feel like fighting. It feels like dying. Maybe you have to die a little bit to be reborn into something better. I looked at her. Did you just make that up? No, I read it on a coffee mug once. She smiled. But it's still true. I went home after that. Sat in my small house with my small life and waited for tomorrow to come. The phone rang around 6 p.m. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Grandma? My heart stopped. Sophia? Yeah. Her voice was small, tentative. Nothing like the confident girl who'd thrown juice on me. How did you get this number? I took Mom's phone. She's in the shower. A pause. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I sat down at the kitchen table. For what? For the juice. For laughing. For... She trailed off. For everything. Did your mother tell you to call me? No, she'd kill me if she knew I was talking to you. She said you're trying to destroy our family. Is that what you think? Silence. Sophia, I need you to tell me the truth. Did your mother tell you to throw that juice on me? More silence, then so quietly I almost didn't hear it. Yes. I closed my eyes. Why? She said you were being annoying. She said you always ruin everything and we should teach you a lesson. Sophia's voice cracked. I didn't want to do it, but Mom said if I didn't, I couldn't go to Emma's sleepover and all my friends were watching and I'm sorry, Grandma. I'm really sorry. Where's your father in all this? Dad doesn't know. He was outside when Mom told me to do it. She said it would be funny and everyone would laugh and you'd just leave and we wouldn't have to deal with you anymore. Sophia started crying. But it wasn't funny, and now Mom and Dad are fighting all the time, and Dad says we might have to move, and it's all my fault. It's not your fault, I said firmly. None of this is your fault, Sophia. You're 11 years old. Your mother never should have put you in that position. Are you really trying to take our house away? I'm trying to protect myself from people who have been stealing from me, that includes your parents. But we'll have nowhere to go. That's not my responsibility. The words came out harsher than I intended, but they were true. It wasn't my responsibility to house my son's family. It wasn't my responsibility to fund their lifestyle. It wasn't my responsibility to set myself on fire to keep them warm. I have to go, Sophia whispered. I hear Mom getting out of the shower. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Sophia, wait, Bunko? But she'd already hung up. I sat there holding the phone, feeling something crack open in my chest again. That child, that poor child caught in the middle of her parents' dysfunction, being used as a weapon against me and then being made to feel guilty about it. For just a moment I wavered. Maybe I should drop this. Maybe I should forgive the debt, forget the fraud, let them keep the house for the kids. Then I remembered that the kids would grow up learning that manipulation works, that fraud is acceptable, that family means having unlimited access to someone else's resources without consequences. I remembered that protecting Sophia and Tommy meant teaching them, even indirectly, that actions have consequences. I put the phone down and didn't call her back. The next day, I arrived at the courthouse 15 minutes early. Patricia was already there with her tech expert, a young guy named Kevin, who looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. "We got everything," Kevin said, opening his laptop to show me. The emails were sent from a spoofed address created yesterday morning. The metadata shows they all originated from the same IP address, which traces back to, he checked his notes, a Starbucks 3 blocks from the plaintiff's house. We pulled security footage. Want to guess who was sitting there with a laptop at 9 a.m. yesterday? He turned the laptop to show me a grainy photo of Carla, hunched over a computer in a coffee shop, her face intent. "That idiot," Patricia said, but she was smiling. She faked evidence and documented herself doing it. The courtroom filled up quickly. Daniel and Carla arrived with Webb, who looked significantly less confident than yesterday. When Kevin set up his laptop and started walking through the evidence, I watched all the color drain from Webb's face. The judge listened to the entire presentation in silence. Then she turned to Daniel and Carla. "Mrs. Price," she said to Carla, "did you create these fake emails?" Carla's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. "I can hold you in contempt right now," the judge said, "or you can answer the question." "I was trying to protect my family," Carla said finally, "by committing forgery and presenting false evidence to this court. She's destroying us. Someone had to do something." "You did this to yourselves," the judge said, and her voice was ice. "Mr. Webb, I'm sanctioning you and your clients for filing fraudulent evidence. Mrs. Vance, I'm granting your motion to remove Mrs. Eleanor Price from the mortgage. The plaintiffs have 30 days to refinance the loan in their own names or put the house on the market. Your Honor, please." Daniel was on his feet. "We can't refinance. Our credit isn't good enough, and if we sell, we'll have nowhere to go." "You should have thought of that before you committed fraud against your mother," the judge said. "I'm also denying the request for a restraining order and dismissing the lawsuit against Mrs. Eleanor Price with prejudice. As for the criminal charges, that's up to the district attorney's office, but I'll be forwarding this case to them with a recommendation for prosecution." Webb tried one more time. "Your Honor, if you could just—" "I'm done, Mr. Webb. This court is adjourned." The gavel came down. I sat there in shock while the courtroom erupted around me. Carla was screaming at Webb. Daniel had his head in his hands. Patricia was shaking hands with Kevin, thanking him. We'd won. I'd won. So why did I feel like I was going to throw up? Patricia drove me home. I couldn't drive myself. My hands were shaking too badly. "You did it," she said. "You actually did it. I destroyed my son's life." "No, he destroyed his own life. You just stopped letting him destroy yours too." She walked me to my door, made sure I got inside safely, and promised to call me tomorrow with next steps. Then I was alone again. I sat on my couch and waited to feel something. Relief, victory, peace. Instead, I felt hollow. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I hope you're happy. You just made your grandchildren homeless. What kind of grandmother does that?" I blocked the number. Another text, different number. "You're a monster." Blocked. Another. "I hope you die alone." Blocked. They came in waves, one after another, different numbers, but the same message. I was terrible. I was cruel. I was destroying the family. I turned my phone off. The house was so quiet. I walked through it, room by room. The living room where I used to host Christmas before Daniel and Carla decided their house was more appropriate for family gatherings. The kitchen where I'd cooked 1,000 meals. The bedroom where I'd slept alone for 7 years. This was my life. This small, quiet house and the wreckage of a family that had never really loved me. I thought about Sophia's phone call, about her crying, about her apology. I thought about Tommy, 8 years old, who probably had no idea what was happening except that Grandma was bad now. I thought about the house they were going to lose, the life they'd built on money they'd stolen from me, and I thought about the $75,000, the reverse mortgage on my house, the retirement I'd never have, the years I'd spent making myself smaller so they could be bigger. I'd spent my whole life trying to buy their love, and in the end, all I'd bought was their contempt. The doorbell rang. I almost didn't answer it, but something made me look through the peephole. Margaret was standing on my porch, holding a casserole dish. I opened the door. "I brought dinner," she said, "because I figured you wouldn't eat otherwise." "How did you know about today?" "You told me yesterday the court date was today, so here I am." She pushed past me into the house. "Where's your kitchen?" I followed her, watching as she set the casserole on the counter and started opening cupboards to find plates. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." She found the plates and started serving food. "Now sit down and tell me what happened." So I did. I told her everything, the fake emails, the security footage, the judge's ruling, the 30 days Daniel and Carla had to refinance. Margaret listened while we ate, and when I finished, she put down her fork and looked at me. "Good," she said. "Good, good. They deserved it, and you deserve to be free of them. They're my family. They are parasites who happen to share your DNA. That's not the same thing as family." I stared at her. "You can't really believe that. Eleanor, I've known you for 15 years. In all that time, has your son ever once done something for you without expecting something in return? Has he ever called just to see how you're doing? Has he ever shown up when you needed help?" I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. "That's what I thought," Margaret said gently. "Real family doesn't keep score. Real family doesn't drain you dry and then act surprised when you have nothing left to give. You didn't destroy them. You just stopped letting them destroy you." We finished dinner in silence. Margaret did the dishes despite my protests, then made us both tea and settled into my living room couch like she lived there. "I'm staying tonight," she announced. "What?" "You shouldn't be alone, so I'm staying." "Margaret, you don't have to." "I know. But here's what you don't know. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this because someone should have done it for me 20 years ago when I left my abusive husband, and no one did. So tonight, you get what I needed back then. Company, solidarity, someone to remind you that you're not crazy, and you're not cruel, and you're not alone." I started crying then. Big, ugly sobs that I couldn't control. Margaret moved to sit next to me and put her arm around my shoulders, and I cried into her sweater while she patted my back and murmured things I couldn't quite hear. "It hurts," I managed to say between sobs. "I know. I didn't want this. I know. I just wanted them to love me. I know, honey. I know." We sat like that for a long time. Eventually the crying stopped and exhaustion took over. Margaret helped me to bed, brought me water, and settled herself on my couch with blankets from the linen closet. "Thank you," I said from my bedroom doorway. "You're welcome. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be hard too, but you're going to get through it." I closed my door and lay in bed, listening to Margaret moving around in my living room. For the first time in 6 weeks, I wasn't alone. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. Margaret was gone when I woke up the next morning, but she'd left coffee made and a note on the kitchen counter. "Call me if you need me. You're stronger than you think, M." I wasn't sure about that last part, but I appreciated the thought. The coffee was terrible. Margaret had never learned the proper ratio of grounds to water, but I drank it anyway while staring at my phone. I'd turned it back on, and there were 47 new messages waiting. I deleted them all without reading them. Patricia called at 9. "We need to talk about what happens next," she said. "I thought it was over. The civil case is over. But the DA's office called me this morning. They want to meet with you." My stomach dropped. "Why?" "Because they're considering pressing charges. Eleanor, the evidence we presented in court, the identity theft, the fraud, the forged emails, that's all criminal behavior. The DA wants to know if you'll cooperate with the prosecution." I sat down at the kitchen table. You mean testify against Daniel? Yes. I can't do that. I understand this is difficult. He's my son, Patricia. I can't send him to prison. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. What if I told you there's more? Patricia said finally. More what? More fraud. The DA's office has been digging into Daniel and Carla's finances. Eleanor, they've been running this scam for years. You're not the only victim. The room felt like it was tilting again. What are you talking about? Carla's mother, for one. They took out a $50,000 loan in her name 3 years ago. She's in a nursing home with dementia. She probably doesn't even know. And there are at least 2 other elderly relatives who've had suspicious charges on their credit cards that trace back to Daniel and Carla. I couldn't breathe. How many people? They're still investigating, but so far, at least 5, probably more. 5 people. 5 families torn apart the same way mine had been. The DA wants to build a case, Patricia continued, but they need someone willing to testify, someone who can speak to the pattern of behavior. That's you, Eleanor. I need time to think. You have 48 hours, then they're moving forward with or without you. She hung up. I sat there with my terrible coffee and my worst thoughts, trying to process what I'd just learned. Daniel hadn't just stolen from me. He'd made a career out of stealing from elderly family members who trusted him. And Carla, perfect polished Carla, who was so concerned about organic juice and private schools, had been his accomplice the whole time. My phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Price? A woman's voice, older, shaking slightly. This is Helen Cartwright. I'm Daniel's aunt on his father's side. I remembered Helen. We'd met at my husband's funeral, maybe twice at family gatherings after that. She lived in Florida, had to be in her 80s by now. Hello, Helen? I heard about the court case from my daughter. She saw something on Facebook. Helen paused. Is it true? Did Daniel steal from you? Yes. He stole from me too. The words hung in the air between us. When? I asked. 2 years ago. He called me, said he was starting a business and needed investors. I gave him $30,000 from my retirement account. He said I'd get it back with interest. Her voice broke. I never saw a penny. When I asked about it, he said the business failed, but there was never any business, was there? I don't think so. I should have known. I should have asked more questions, but he was family and he sounded so desperate and I just wanted to help. She started crying. I can't afford to lose that money, Mrs. Price. I'm living on Social Security. That was supposed to last me the rest of my life. I'm so sorry, Helen. The prosecutor called me yesterday. They want me to press charges too, but I don't know if I can. He's family. There it was again, that word, family. As if sharing blood gave someone unlimited license to destroy you. Helen, can I ask you something? Of course. When was the last time Daniel called you? Not to ask for money, just to call. Silence. That's what I thought, I said quietly. He's not family. He's a con artist who happens to be related to us. But what about the children? If we send him to prison, what happens to them? I thought about Sophia's phone call. About Tommy's innocent face, about 2 kids being raised by parents who thought fraud was an acceptable way to solve their problems. Maybe prison is the best thing that could happen to those kids, I said. Maybe they need to learn that actions have consequences before they grow up thinking this is normal. Helen was quiet for a long time. Will you testify? She asked finally. I don't know yet. Will you? I don't know either, but Mrs. Price, whatever you decide, I'll do the same. You're braver than I am. If you can stand up to him, then maybe I can too. We hung up after that and I sat there thinking about Helen in Florida, living on Social Security, probably eating cat food to make her budget stretch because my son had stolen her retirement. I thought about Carla's mother in a nursing home, confused and vulnerable, being exploited by her own daughter. I thought about the other victims Patricia had mentioned, people whose names I didn't even know yet. And I thought about what would happen if I didn't testify, if I let Daniel and Carla walk away from this with nothing more than a slap on the wrist. They do it again, to someone else, some other elderly relative who trusted them. The doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and froze. Daniel was standing on my porch. For a moment, I considered not answering, calling the police, hiding in my own house until he went away. But I was tired of hiding. I opened the door, but kept the chain lock engaged. "What do you want?" Daniel looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, wearing the same clothes he'd had on in court yesterday. He looked like he hadn't slept. "Good. Mom, please, we need to talk." "No, we don't. Just 5 minutes, please." Against my better judgment, I unlocked the chain and opened the door. But I didn't invite him in. We stood there on opposite sides of the threshold, the morning sun harsh on both our faces. "Say what you need to say." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry for all of it. The money, the credit cards, the emails. I'm sorry." "No, you're not." "Yes, I am. Mom, I never meant for things to get this bad. You just meant to steal from me a little bit. Is that it?" His face flushed. "It wasn't stealing. You're my mother. I thought you'd understand." "Understand what? That you're a criminal? That you've been defrauding me for years? That you turned your own daughter into someone who thinks it's funny to humiliate people?" Sophia didn't mean, yes, she did, because Carla told her to. Your wife orchestrated that whole thing, Daniel. She used your daughter as a weapon against me and you let her. Carla was just upset. Carla is a con artist, and so are you. Daniel's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You don't know what it's like. The pressure, the bills, trying to give our kids a good life. On stolen money. It wasn't stolen. You gave us that money. I gave you $75,000. You stole another $150,000 through credit cards and loans I never authorized. Don't stand there and lie to me, Daniel. I have the documentation." His face went white. How did I find out I hired a lawyer who actually knows what she's doing? Unlike you, apparently, since you were stupid enough to fake emails from a Starbucks with security cameras. That was Carla's idea. I don't care whose idea it was. My voice had risen without me realizing it. You did it. You both did it. And now you're here asking for what? Forgiveness? Another loan? What could you possibly want from me that you haven't already taken? Daniel's expression changed. The fake contrition fell away, and what was underneath was ugly. "I want you to drop the charges." "There are no charges yet. The DA called me. They're building a case. They talked to Aunt Helen, to Carla's mom's nursing home, to God knows who else. They're trying to make me look like some kind of criminal mastermind. You are a criminal, Daniel. You committed fraud multiple times against multiple people. They're family. It's different when it's family." "No, it's not. It's actually worse." He stepped closer, and I instinctively stepped back. Something in his eyes made my skin crawl. "If you testify against me, I'll make sure you never see your grandchildren again." There it was, the threat I'd been waiting for. "You can't do that. Watch me. I'll move across the country. I'll change our names. I'll tell Sophia and Tommy that you're dead. You'll never hear from any of us again." My heart was pounding, but my voice stayed steady. "You're going to lose the house, Daniel. The judge already ruled. You have 30 days to refinance or sell, and we both know you can't refinance. You won't be moving across the country. You'll be lucky if you can afford an apartment in the bad part of town. This is your fault," he hissed. "All of it. If you just helped us like you were supposed to." "I did help you for years. I gave you everything I had, and it still wasn't enough. Because it was never about the money, was it? It was about control, about having someone you could manipulate and use and throw away when you were done. You're my mother. You're supposed to take care of me." And there it was, the core belief that had poisoned our relationship from the start. "You're 42 years old, Daniel. I'm not supposed to take care of you anymore. I did my job. I raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head. You were supposed to grow up and become a man. Instead, you became a leech." He grabbed my arm, hard enough to hurt. "Don't you dare let go of me. Not until you promise. Let go of me right now, or I'm calling the police." He held on for another second, his fingers digging into my arm. Then he released me and stepped back, breathing hard. "You're going to regret this," he said. "I already do. I regret every dollar I ever gave you, every sacrifice I made, every time I chose your needs over my own dignity. But I'm done now. So you can leave, or I can call the police and have you arrested for assault. Your choice." He stared at me for a long moment. I could see the calculation in his eyes, weighing whether he could still manipulate me, still find some angle to work. Then he turned and walked back to his car without another word. I watched him drive away, then closed the door and locked it. My hands were shaking. My arm hurt where he'd grabbed it. There'd be bruises tomorrow. My son had just physically threatened me. I called Patricia. "He came to my house," I said when she answered. "He grabbed me. He threatened to take the kids away if I testify." "Did you call the police?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I'm still hoping there's a part of him that's salvageable. Is that stupid?" "Yes," Patricia said bluntly. "But I understand. Eleanor, you need to document everything. Take photos of your arm. Write down exactly what he said, exact quotes if you can remember them. And if he contacts you again, you call the police immediately. Understood?" "Understood." "Good. Now, have you made a decision about testifying?" I looked at my arm, at the red marks that were already darkening to purple. "Yes," I said, "I'll do it." The meeting with the DA was scheduled for the following Monday. I spent the weekend preparing, going through every document, every bank statement, every piece of evidence I had. Margaret came over on Saturday and helped me organize everything into chronological order. We worked at my kitchen table, spreading papers across every surface, building a timeline of Daniel's fraud. "This is damning," Margaret said, looking at a credit card statement from 2 years ago. "He charged $15,000 in 1 month. What was he even buying?" I looked at the itemized list. Furniture, electronics, jewelry, a trip to Hawaii, while you were working part-time at the library to pay your electric bill. "Yes." Margaret shook her head. "How did you not notice?" "Because I trusted him. Because I thought if he needed something he'd ask. It never occurred to me that he'd just take it." We worked in silence for a while. Then Margaret said, "Can I ask you something personal?" At this point, what's left that isn't personal? "What happened with Daniel's father?" "You never talk about him." I sat back in my chair. "He died 7 years ago. Liver failure from alcoholism." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He was a drunk and a coward, and the day he died was the first day I could breathe properly in 30 years. Margaret's eyebrows went up. "I know how that sounds," I said, "but it's true. He was never violent, never mean, just absent. He'd come home from work, start drinking, and disappear into himself. I raised Daniel alone, essentially. Worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat because my husband kept getting fired for showing up drunk. And when he died, he left me this house and about $15,000 in life insurance. That's it. No retirement, no savings. Just debt and a house that needed repairs I couldn't afford." I looked at the papers spread across my table. I gave most of that insurance money to Daniel. He said he needed it for a down payment on his first apartment. I wanted him to have a better start than I did, and he pissed it away. Like father, like son. Margaret reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You deserved better." "Yeah, I did." We finished organizing the documents by Sunday afternoon. Margaret left after making me promise to eat dinner, and I spent the evening going through everything one more time. There was so much. Years of financial abuse documented in black and white. And this was just what I knew about. The DA had mentioned other victims, other schemes I hadn't even been aware of. My phone rang. "Patricia." "I have bad news," she said. My stomach dropped. "What now?" "Daniel and Carla filed for bankruptcy this morning." "Can they do that?" "Unfortunately, yes. It won't protect them from the criminal charges, but it'll complicate the civil side of things. They're trying to discharge the debts before they lose the house. So I won't get any of my money back." "Probably not. I'm sorry, Eleanor." I sat down on the couch. I never expected to get it back anyway. "Still, I know this isn't the outcome you wanted." "The outcome I wanted was for my son to love me. The money was always secondary." Patricia was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, I think you're incredibly brave. I don't feel brave, I feel tired. Those aren't mutually exclusive. We hung up, and I sat there in my quiet house thinking about bankruptcy and criminal charges and everything that was about to happen. The meeting with the DA was in a downtown office building that smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams. The prosecutor was a woman in her 30s named Amanda Chen, with sharp eyes and a handshake that meant business. "Thank you for coming in, Mrs. Price," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. Patricia sat beside me. "I know this isn't easy." "Nothing about this has been easy. I've reviewed all the evidence your attorney provided, and I've spoken with the other victims. What your son and daughter-in-law did, this wasn't opportunistic fraud. This was systematic exploitation of vulnerable family members over a period of at least 5 years. How many victims total? 8 that we've identified so far, possibly more. The total amount stolen is somewhere in the neighborhood of $400,000. $400,000. I felt sick. Most of the victims are elderly, Amanda continued. Your husband's Aunt Helen, Carla's mother, 2 of Carla's elderly cousins, a neighbor who trusted them to handle some financial matters. They targeted people who were isolated, confused, or too trusting to question them. What happens now? We're preparing to file formal charges: fraud, identity theft, elder abuse, forgery. If convicted, they're looking at significant prison time. But here's the thing. Cases like this often come down to testimony. Bank records can be explained away, but when victims stand up and tell their stories, juries listen. You want me to testify at trial? Yes, and I want you to understand what that means. You'll be cross-examined by their defense attorney. They'll try to make you look vindictive, confused, like you gave them permission for all of this and now you're just bitter about it. It won't be pleasant. I thought about the birthday party, about the grape juice, about years of being treated like an ATM machine. I can handle unpleasant. Amanda smiled. I believe you can. There's something else you should know. Daniel's been making calls from jail. He's in jail as of this morning. We arrested him and Carla on the fraud charges. They couldn't make bail. She pulled out a transcript. He's been calling family members, trying to get them to change their stories, telling them you're senile, that you've always had it out for him, that this is all a misunderstanding. Is it working? So far, no. Everyone we've talked to has confirmed their stories. But I wanted you to be aware that he's not going down without a fight. Patricia leaned forward. What about the children? They're with Carla's sister temporarily. Child services is involved, making sure they're in a stable environment. I thought about Sophia and Tommy, probably confused and scared, being bounced between relatives while their parents sat in jail. Can I see them? Amanda and Patricia exchanged glances. That's complicated, Amanda said. Technically, you're not prohibited from seeing them, but given the circumstances, it might not be advisable until after the trial. Why not? Because Daniel's defense is going to be that you're a bitter, vindictive woman who's poisoning everyone against them. If you have contact with the grandchildren, they'll say you're manipulating them too. So I'm supposed to just abandon them? Let them think I don't care? You're supposed to protect yourself first, Patricia said gently. Once this is over, once Daniel and Carla are held accountable, then you can work on rebuilding a relationship with Sophia and Tommy. But right now, you need to focus on making sure justice is served. I wanted to argue, but deep down I knew they were right. The trial was set for 3 months out. 3 months of waiting, of preparing, of watching my life become public record as the local news picked up the story. Elderly mother testifies against son in massive fraud case. The headlines were brutal. Social media was worse. Someone had posted my address online, and I started getting hate mail from strangers who thought I was a terrible mother for betraying my son. Never mind that he'd stolen from me. Never mind that he'd victimized 8 other people. Never mind any of it. I was the villain because I dared to hold him accountable. Margaret helped me install security cameras. Patricia got me a restraining order against Daniel and Carla, though it was mostly symbolic since they were in jail. And I waited. The preliminary hearing was a nightmare. I had to sit in a courtroom and listen to Daniel's lawyer paint me as a confused old woman who didn't understand her own finances, who had willingly given her son money and was now regretting it. Isn't it true, Mrs. Price, that you frequently gave your son loans? Yes, but... And isn't it true that you never asked him to sign promissory notes? He's my son, I trusted. So you have no legal proof that these were loans and not gifts. I have bank records showing money you willingly transferred, not money he stole. It went on like that for hours. By the time they called a recess, I was shaking. Patricia pulled me aside. You did fine. I sounded like an idiot. You sounded like a woman telling the truth. That's all we need. But I wasn't sure it was enough. The trial date got moved twice. Once because Daniel fired his lawyer and hired a new one. Once because Carla claimed she was too sick to appear in court. More delays, more waiting, more nights lying awake wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. Then, 2 weeks before the trial was supposed to start, Patricia called with news that changed everything. They want to take a plea deal. I sat down. What kind of deal? Daniel pleads guilty to fraud and identity theft. Gets 5 years, eligible for parole in 3. Carla pleads guilty to conspiracy and forgery. Gets 3 years, eligible for parole in 18 months. In exchange, you and the other victims get restitution payments. How much restitution? Realistically, pennies on the dollar. They don't have any money, Eleanor. Even if they ordered to pay you back, there's nothing to take. So they destroy my life and they get a slap on the wrist. 5 years in prison isn't a slap on the wrist. And it means you don't have to testify. You don't have to go through a trial. This ends. I thought about it, about standing up in court, being cross-examined, having my whole life picked apart by strangers, about finally being done with all of this. What do the other victims want? Most of them want to take the deal. They're tired, Eleanor. They just want it to be over. What do you think I should do? I think you should do whatever helps you sleep at night. I thought about that for a long time. In the end, I agreed to the plea deal. Not because I thought it was enough, it wasn't, but because I was so tired of fighting and because 5 years felt like something, even if it wasn't everything. The sentencing hearing was quick. Daniel and Carla stood before the judge in orange jumpsuits, their faces blank. The judge asked if they had anything to say. Carla cried and apologized, claiming she'd been led astray by financial pressure and bad decisions. Daniel looked at me and said nothing. The judge sentenced them according to the plea agreement, then turned to the victims. Does anyone wish to make a statement? I stood up. My legs were shaking, but my voice was steady. I loved my son, I said. I gave him everything I had because I thought that's what mothers do. I sacrificed my retirement, my security, my peace of mind. And he took it all and asked for more. He didn't just steal my money, he stole my dignity. He stole years of my life. And he did it without remorse, without regret, without ever once thinking about the consequences. I looked at Daniel. I hope prison teaches you something I never could. I hope it teaches you that people aren't resources to be exploited. I hope it teaches you that family means more than what you can take from them. I paused, but I'm not holding my breath. I sat down. The judge thanked me, made some remarks about the seriousness of elder abuse, and adjourned the court. It was done. Daniel and Carla were led away in handcuffs. I watched them go and felt absolutely nothing. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. Cameras, microphones, people shouting questions. Patricia steered me through them without letting me stop. How does it feel to send your son to prison? Do you regret pressing charges? What about your grandchildren? I didn't answer any of them. I just got in Patricia's car and let her drive me home. When we pulled up to my house, she turned to me. It's over, she said. You can start moving on now. I don't know how. You will. Give it time. I got out of the car and walked into my small, quiet house. The house I'd almost lost because I'd been too busy saving Daniel to save myself. And for the first time in months, I let myself think about the future, about what came next, about who I could be now that I'd finally stopped being who everyone else needed me to be. The house felt different after the sentencing. Lighter somehow, even though nothing physical had changed. Same peeling paint, same creaky floors, same furniture I'd owned for 20 years because I couldn't afford to replace it. But the weight was gone. That crushing sense of obligation, of never being enough, of always owing something to someone who would never be satisfied. I sat at my kitchen table the morning after the trial and realized I had no idea what to do with myself. For months, my entire life had revolved around court dates and lawyer meetings and documentation. Wake up, organize evidence, meet with Patricia, go home, lie awake worrying. Repeat. Now there was nothing, just empty days stretching ahead of me and a future I hadn't planned for because I'd been too busy surviving the present. Margaret called around 9. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Lost." "That's normal. You just went through a war. You're allowed to feel lost." "I don't know what to do now." "Whatever you want. That's the whole point, Eleanor. You're free." Free. The word felt foreign. I'd never been free. I'd gone from my parents' house to my husband's house, from taking care of him to taking care of Daniel, from one obligation to the next without ever stopping to ask what I wanted. "I'm 66 years old," I said. "I have no savings, my credit is ruined, and I work part-time at a library. What exactly am I free to do?" Anything that doesn't involve sacrificing yourself for people who don't deserve it. I wanted to argue with her, but she had a point. "Come to lunch today," Margaret said. "My treat. We'll figure it out together." We met at a diner downtown, the kind of place with worn booths and coffee that could strip paint. Margaret was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with 2 menus. "I ordered you coffee," she said. "The real stuff, not that decaf nonsense you always get." I slid into the booth across from her. "I drink decaf because caffeine makes me jittery." "You need jittery. You've been too calm for too long." The waitress brought our coffee, and I wrapped my hands around the mug, grateful for something to hold on to. "So, Margaret said, what do you want to do with the rest of your life?" "I have no idea." "Wrong answer. Try again." "Margaret, what did you want to do before you got married, before you had Daniel? What were your dreams?" I stared at her. "I don't remember. That was 45 years ago." "Then make new dreams. You're not dead yet." The waitress came back and took our orders. After she left, Margaret pulled out a notebook and a pen. "We're making a list," she announced. "Of what?" "Of everything you've ever wanted to do but couldn't because you were too busy being everyone else's solution." "This is ridiculous, and humor me." I sighed. "Fine, I always wanted to travel. See Europe maybe, or even just California. I've never been west of Kansas." Margaret wrote it down. "What else?" "I wanted to learn to paint. I took an art class in high school and loved it, but after I got married, there was never time." "What else?" "I wanted to own a business, something small, something mine, maybe a bookstore or a cafe." Margaret looked up. "That's a good one. Keep going." By the time our food arrived, we had a list of 15 things. Some were big: travel, start a business, take art classes. Some were small: learn to bake bread, get a library card in a different city just because I could, buy myself flowers every week. "This is a good list," Margaret said, studying it. "Now we just need to figure out which one to start with." "I can't do any of these. I don't have money for travel or art classes or starting a business." "You have some money. The restitution payments will start coming eventually. Patricia said it'll be pennies on the dollar, if anything." "So we get creative. You want to travel, start small, day trips to places you've never been. You want to learn honors to paint. The community center offers classes for $20. You want to own a business, start planning. Research, dream on paper until you can make it real." I looked at the list, then at Margaret. "Why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" "Being so nice to me. You barely know me. We've worked together for 15 years, but we've never been close. Why do you care what happens to me now?" Margaret was quiet for a moment, stirring sugar into her coffee. "I told you about my ex-husband," she said finally. "What I didn't tell you is that after I left him, I had nobody. My family sided with him, said I was breaking up the marriage over nothing. My friends disappeared because domestic abuse makes people uncomfortable. I spent 2 years completely alone, working 2 jobs to pay rent on a studio apartment, convinced I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. I'm sorry." "Don't be, because you know what I learned. Being alone is better than being with people who destroy you. And I also learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is refuse to let them give up on themselves." She looked at me. "You're not giving up, Eleanor. Not on my watch." I started crying right there in the diner, and Margaret reached across the table and squeezed my hand until I could breathe again. We finished lunch and made a plan. Small steps. Manageable goals. Nothing that required money I didn't have or courage I wasn't sure I possessed. The first thing on the list, take a day trip somewhere I'd never been. That Saturday, I drove 2 hours north to a small town I'd seen signs for my entire life, but never visited. It had an art museum, a historic downtown, and a farmer's market. I spent the whole day there, wandering through galleries, buying fresh vegetables I didn't need, sitting on a bench by a fountain and watching people live their lives. It was the first time in months I'd done something just for myself, not for Daniel, not for the case, not for anyone but me. And it felt strange, good but strange, like I was learning to walk again after years in a wheelchair. When I got home that evening, I felt lighter, not happy exactly, but less heavy, like maybe Margaret was right, and freedom was something I could learn. The second thing on the list, art classes at the community center. I signed up for a beginner's painting class that met Tuesday evenings. 12 weeks, $20, all supplies included. The first night, I almost didn't go. I sat in my car in the parking lot, staring at the community center entrance, thinking about all the reasons this was stupid. I was too old. I had no talent. Everyone else would be younger, better, more deserving of being there. Then I thought about Daniel in prison and Carla beside him, and all the years I'd spent making myself small so they could be big. I went inside. The class was taught by a woman in her 40s named Rachel, who had paint permanently embedded under her fingernails and a smile that made you feel like anything was possible. "Don't worry about being good," she said on that first night. "Just worry about showing up and putting paint on canvas. That's all art is, showing up and being willing to make a mess." I made a lot of messes over those 12 weeks. My paintings were terrible. Colors that didn't blend right, perspectives that made no sense, trees that looked like broccoli and skies that looked like mud. But I kept showing up, and slowly something shifted. Not my skill. I was still terrible, but my relationship with being terrible. I started to enjoy the mess, started to see the beauty in imperfection, started to understand that maybe I didn't have to be good at something for it to be worth doing. The third thing on the list came about by accident. I was at the library one afternoon, reshelving books in the cooking section, when I found a book about opening a small cafe. I pulled it off the shelf out of curiosity and ended up reading the whole thing during my lunch break. It talked about business plans and startup costs and finding your niche. It made it seem possible, not easy, but possible. I checked the book out and took it home. For weeks I devoured every resource I could find about small business ownership. YouTube videos, library books, free online courses. I learned about permits and health codes and profit margins, and I started to dream. Not about a generic cafe, but about what I would want if I could have anything. A cozy space with big windows and comfortable chairs, bookshelves lining the walls, customers could read while they drank their coffee. Simple food, sandwiches, pastries, nothing fancy. A place where people felt welcome, where nobody was just a transaction. I knew it was impossible. I had no money for a startup. My credit was ruined. No bank would give me a loan. But knowing something is impossible and allowing yourself to dream about it anyway, that's a kind of freedom too. Then, 4 months after the sentencing, something unexpected happened. I got a letter from an attorney I'd never heard of, representing my late husband's mother's estate. My mother-in-law had died 6 months earlier. We hadn't been close. She'd blamed me for her son's drinking, as if I'd poured the whiskey down his throat myself. I hadn't even known she was sick. According to the letter, she'd left me $25,000 in her will. I read the letter 3 times, convinced it was a mistake. It wasn't. The money came with a note written in her shaky handwriting before she died, for Eleanor, who deserved better than my son gave her. Use this to build something good. I sat at my kitchen table and cried. $25,000. It wasn't life-changing money. It wasn't quit-your-job money, but it was something. It was possibility. I called Margaret. I could actually do it, I said. The cafe, I could actually try. Then do it. I'm 66 years old. What if I fail? What if you succeed? I spent the next 6 months planning. Not dreaming anymore, actually planning. I found a tiny space for rent in a neighborhood that was just starting to gentrify. Used to be a dry cleaner, needed massive work, but the rent was cheap and the landlord was willing to negotiate. I hired a contractor to do the major renovations and did everything else myself. Painted the walls at night after my library shifts. Installed shelves on weekends. Learned to make coffee that didn't taste like battery acid. Margaret helped. So did some of the other librarians. Rachel from my art classes designed a logo for free. A simple coffee cup with a book balanced on the saucer. I called it Second Chances Cafe. On the nose? Maybe, but it was my cafe and I got to call it whatever I wanted. Opening day was terrifying. I'd spent every penny of the inheritance, maxed out a small business credit card, and taken a leap of faith that felt more like jumping off a cliff. What if nobody came? What if they came and hated it? What if I'd made a huge mistake? Margaret showed up at 6 a.m. 2 hours before opening and found me having a panic attack in the bathroom. You're going to be fine, she said, rubbing my back while I hyperventilated into a paper bag. What if I'm not? Then you'll be not fine in a cafe you built with your own 2 hands. That's still better than being fine in Daniel's shadow. She was right. We opened at 8. By 8:30, we had 5 customers. By noon, we had 20. By closing time, we'd served 63 people and made $400 in sales. It wasn't enough to cover expenses, not even close. But it was a start. The first few months were brutal. I worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week, woke up at 4 a.m. to prep food, stayed until 8 p.m. to clean. My feet hurt constantly. My back ached. I was exhausted in ways I'd never been exhausted before. But it was my exhaustion, my pain, my choice. And slowly, the cafe started to find its rhythm. Regulars appeared, the woman who came in every morning for a cappuccino and the newspaper, the college student who studied at the corner table for hours, the elderly couple who split a muffin and held hands while they read. People started recommending us. We got a good review in the local paper. Sales picked up. 6 months in, I broke even for the first time. Didn't make a profit, but didn't lose money either. It felt like winning the lottery. I was restocking the pastry case one afternoon when the bell over the door chimed, and I looked up to see Sophia standing there. She'd grown. She was almost 13 now, taller, her face losing its little girl softness. She was wearing her school uniform and carrying a backpack, and she looked terrified. We stared at each other for a long moment. "Hi, Grandma," she said finally. "Sophia, what are you doing here?" "Aunt Lindsay dropped me off. She said it was okay if I visited you." She twisted the strap of her backpack. "Is it okay?" I should have said no, should have called Patricia, checked if this violated some legal boundary, protected myself. Instead, I said, "Do you want a hot chocolate?" Her face brightened. "Yes, please." I made her the best hot chocolate I knew how. Real chocolate, steamed milk, whipped cream on top. Set it down at a table by the window and sat across from her. "How have you been?" I asked. "Okay, I guess. Aunt Lindsay is nice. Tommy and I share a room, which sucks, but it's better than—" She trailed off. Better than what? Better than before, when Mom and Dad were fighting all the time. She took a sip of hot chocolate, got whipped cream on her nose. I'm sorry, Grandma, for everything, for the juice, for what Mom made me do, for all of it. I know you are. Do you hate me? The question was so earnest, so full of fear, that it broke my heart. No, honey, I don't hate you. I never hated you. But you sent my parents to prison. I reported them for committing crimes. That's not the same thing. Aunt Lindsay says they did bad things, that they stole from people. They did. Did they steal from you? I looked at this child, this confused, hurting child who'd been caught in the crossfire of her parents' greed. Yes, I said, they did. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know. I thought you were just being mean. That's what Mom said. Your mom said a lot of things that weren't true. Are they going to be in prison forever? No, a few years probably. Maybe less if they behave. And then what? I don't know, Sophia. That's up to them. She finished her hot chocolate in silence. Then she said, This place is really nice. Did you build it yourself? Mostly, yeah, with help from friends. It's cool. I like all the books. You can borrow one if you want. Bring it back next time. Can I come back? I should have said no. Should have maintained boundaries, protected myself from further hurt. But she was my granddaughter and she was trying. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is give someone a second chance even when you're terrified they'll waste it. Yes, I said, you can come back. She smiled, a real smile, not the fake one from the birthday party, and something in my chest loosened. Sophia started visiting once a week. Lindsay would drop her off after school and she'd do homework at the corner table while I worked. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't. It was awkward and fragile and imperfect, but it was something. Tommy came with her once, shy and quiet, barely able to look at me. I gave him cookies and didn't push. He didn't come back for a while, but that was okay. Healing doesn't happen on a schedule. The cafe kept growing. I hired 2 part-time employees, college students who needed flexible hours, started staying open later, adding dinner service twice a week. A year after opening, I was finally turning a profit. Not much, but enough to pay myself a small salary on top of covering expenses. I quit my library job. Margaret threw me a party and I cried into the cake she'd bought. You did it, she said, hugging me tight. You actually did it. I couldn't have without you. Yeah, you could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to. Life developed a new rhythm. Early mornings at the cafe, afternoons prepping for dinner service, evenings doing paperwork and planning, weekly art classes with Rachel, where my paintings were still terrible but getting slightly less terrible, monthly dinners with Margaret and a few other friends I'd made, people who liked me for who I was, not what I could give them. Sophia's visits became regular. Sometimes Tommy came too. We didn't talk about Daniel or Carla much. When we did, it was careful, gentle. I never spoke badly about their parents, and they never asked me to pretend what happened was okay. We existed in this strange middle ground, related by blood, but building something new, something that wasn't about guilt or obligation, but about choosing to show up for each other anyway. Then, 18 months after the sentencing, I got a call from Daniel. He'd been transferred to a lower security facility and was eligible for phone calls. His voice on the other end of the line was strange, older, tired, but also something else I couldn't quite identify. Mom? I almost hung up. My finger was on the button, ready to end this before it started. I'm here, I said. I wasn't sure you'd answer. I wasn't sure I would either. Silence. Then, I hear you opened a cafe. Who told you that? Sophia wrote me a letter. She said it's really nice. It is. More silence. Mom, He stopped, started again. I'm sorry for all of it. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know I'm sorry. I wanted to believe him. Some part of me, the part that still remembered him as a little boy before everything went wrong, desperately wanted to believe this was real, but I'd learned to trust my instincts over my desires. Are you sorry you did it, or sorry you got caught? That's not fair. It's a fair question, Daniel. You've had 18 months to think about this. So which is it? He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was different, smaller. Both, he said. I'm sorry I got caught because prison sucks and I hate it here and I miss my kids. But I'm also sorry I did it because, he trailed off, because I see it now. What I took from you, what I took from everyone, and I can't believe I thought it was okay. Do you understand why I reported you? Yeah, I do. Do you understand that I had to? That if I hadn't, you would have just kept going? Yeah. I closed my eyes. What do you want from me, Daniel? I don't know. Forgiveness, maybe? A relationship with you when I get out? I don't know if I deserve any of that, but I'm asking anyway. I can't give you forgiveness right now. Maybe not ever. What you did, it wasn't just about money. You made me feel worthless. You made me believe I only mattered if I was useful to you. I know. Do you? Because knowing something and feeling it are different things. I'm trying to feel it, he said. That's the best I can do. We talked for a few more minutes. He asked about the cafe, about Sophia and Tommy, about my life. I answered carefully, keeping my distance even through the phone line. When we hung up, I sat there for a long time, trying to figure out how I felt. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever, but maybe the beginning of something. Not reconciliation, that felt too generous, but acknowledgement. The possibility that someday, if he proved himself, if he did the work, if he became someone different than who he'd been, there might be a door left open, just a crack, just enough to let a little light through. I told Margaret about the call over coffee the next day. What are you going to do? She asked. Nothing for now. He's still got 3 years left. A lot can change in 3 years. A lot already has. I looked around the cafe, my cafe, filled with customers and light, and the smell of fresh coffee. 2 years ago, I'd been standing in a courtroom broken and humiliated, wondering if I'd ever feel whole again. Now I was here. Not perfect, not healed, but standing, building, moving forward. Yeah, I said, it has. 2 years after opening Second Chances, the cafe had become something I'd never imagined it could be. Not just a business, but a home. My home, in a way my actual house had never felt. The regulars knew my name. They asked about my paintings, which I'd started hanging on the walls between the bookshelves. They brought their friends, their families, their own broken pieces to mend over coffee and conversation. And I was happy. Not the explosive, temporary kind of happy that comes from getting what you want, but the quiet, sustainable kind that comes from building something real with your own hands. But happiness, I was learning, doesn't mean the past stops knocking on your door. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the cafe quiet between lunch and dinner rush, when Carla walked in. I was behind the counter, restocking cups, and I didn't see her at first, just heard the bell chime and called out my usual greeting without looking up. Welcome to Second Chances, I'll be right with you. Hello, Eleanor. I froze. That voice. I'd heard it in my nightmares for 2 years, smooth, controlled, the voice of someone who'd spent a lifetime getting what she wanted through charm and manipulation. I looked up. Carla stood just inside the door, looking nothing like the polished woman who'd orchestrated my humiliation at that birthday party. Her blonde hair was darker now, pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup, jeans and a t-shirt instead of her usual designer clothes. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. She also looked terrified. You're not supposed to be here, I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. The restraining order expired 6 months ago. When I got out, she took a tentative step forward. I know you probably don't want to see me. I wouldn't want to see me either, but I need to talk to you, and I promise I'll leave right after if you want me to. Every instinct screamed at me to tell her to get out, to protect myself, my space, my hard-won peace. But I'd also learned something in the past 2 years. Running from difficult conversations doesn't make them go away. It just lets them fester. You have 5 minutes, I said, and if you try anything, I won't, I promise. She glanced around the cafe, taking in the bookshelves, the art on the walls, the cozy chairs. This place is beautiful. Sophia was right. 4.5 minutes. Carla flinched. Then she walked to the counter, her movements careful, like she was approaching a wild animal. "I came to apologize," she said. "I know that doesn't mean anything. I know words are cheap, but I needed to say it to your face. What I did to you, what Daniel and I did, it was unforgivable. And I'm sorry." I waited. There had to be more. People like Carla didn't show up just to apologize. "I also came to tell you that I'm paying you back," she continued. "I got a job, 2 jobs actually. I'm working as a waitress during the day and cleaning offices at night. Every penny I can spare is going into a fund. It'll take me years, maybe decades, but I'm going to pay back every dollar we stole from you." "Why?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. "Because it's the right thing to do." "No, why now? Why show up here after 2 years? You could have sent a letter, could have had your lawyer contact Patricia. Why come here in person?" Carla's face crumpled. "Because I'm living in a studio apartment with my kids, working 80 hours a week and barely making rent. Because Daniel's still in prison and he's not the same person, and I'm terrified of who he's going to be when he gets out. Because every night I lie awake thinking about what I did and how I destroyed my own life. And I needed to look you in the eye and tell you I know what I took from you. I know what I am." She was crying now, ugly tears that ruined what was left of her composure. "I'm a terrible person," she said. "I used my own daughter to hurt you. I faked evidence. I stole from sick people and old people and people who trusted me. And the worst part is, I didn't even need the money that badly. I just wanted things. I wanted to look successful and feel important and keep up with people who didn't even like me. I should have felt satisfaction. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? To see Carla broken, to hear her admit what she'd done. But looking at her now, I just felt tired. Does Sophia know you're here?" I asked. "No, she'd probably try to stop me. She's very protective of you now." Carla wiped her eyes. "Thank you for letting her visit, for not punishing her for what I did. She's a kid. She doesn't deserve to be punished for your mistakes." "I know. But you still could have shut her out and you didn't. That's more grace than I deserve." "You're right. It is." Carla nodded, accepting the hit. "I should go. I just needed you to know I'm trying to be better, to do better, and I'm going to make this right, even if it takes the rest of my life." She turned to leave. "Carla?" She stopped, looked back. "I don't forgive you," I said. "I might never forgive you. What you did wasn't just about money. You made me feel worthless in my own family. You used my love for my grandchildren as a weapon against me. That kind of damage doesn't heal because you got 2 jobs and cried in my cafe. I know. But," I continued, "if you're serious about paying me back, send the money to Patricia. She'll hold it in escrow. And if you're serious about being better, prove it through actions, not words. Show Sophia and Tommy what real change looks like." "I will, I promise." "Don't promise me. I don't trust your promises. Just do it." She nodded once, then left. I stood there for a long time after she was gone, my hand shaking, my heart racing. Margaret came in for her usual afternoon coffee and found me sitting at a table, staring at nothing. "What happened?" she asked, sliding into the seat across from me. I told her about Carla's visit, about the apology, the jobs, the promise to pay me back. "Do you believe her?" Margaret asked. "I don't know. Part of me wants to. Part of me thinks this is just another manipulation, another angle to work. What does your gut say?" I thought about that, about the woman who'd stood in my cafe, stripped of all her polish and pretense, crying genuine tears. "My gut says she's broken," I said. "Whether she stays broken or becomes something better, that's up to her. And if she doesn't, if she goes back to her old ways, then that's her choice. But it's not my problem anymore." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Carla, about Daniel, about the ways people break and whether they can ever really be put back together. Around midnight, I got out of bed and drove to the cafe. Sometimes when my thoughts got too loud, the only thing that helped was being in that space, surrounded by books and the smell of coffee beans and proof that I'd built something good from the ruins of my old life. I let myself in, turned on a single lamp, and sat in my favorite chair by the window. That's where I was when my phone rang. Daniel. I almost didn't answer. It was midnight, and whatever he wanted could wait until morning. But something made me pick up. "Mom, it's late, Daniel. I know, I'm sorry. I needed to talk to you." He sounded strange, not drunk. They didn't get alcohol in prison, but off somehow, shaky. "What's wrong?" "Carla told me she went to see you today. She called from the prison visitor's phone." "She did. She said you didn't forgive her." "I didn't." "Are you ever going to forgive us?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy, loaded, impossible to answer simply. "I don't know," I said finally. "Maybe, maybe not. Does it matter?" "It matters to me." "Why? What difference does my forgiveness make to your life?" "You're still in prison. Your wife is still working 2 jobs to keep a roof over your kids' heads. Your house is gone, your reputation is destroyed, and you're going to have a felony record for the rest of your life. Whether I forgive you or not doesn't change any of that." "No," Daniel said quietly, "but it changes whether I'm doing this for the right reasons." "Doing what?" "Trying to be better. Going to therapy, reading all these books about addiction and narcissism and how to not be the person I was. I need to know, am I doing this because I actually want to change, or am I just doing it to manipulate you into forgiving me?" I was quiet for a long time. "I can't answer that for you, Daniel. That's something you have to figure out yourself." "How?" "By doing the work anyway. Even if I never forgive you, even if Carla never forgives you, even if your kids grow up and decide they don't want you in their lives. You do the work because it's right, not because you'll get something out of it." "That's hard." "Yeah, it is." He was quiet then. "I saw a therapist in here. She said I have something called dependent personality disorder mixed with narcissistic traits. Basically, I'm so afraid of being abandoned that I try to control everyone around me, and I use people to make myself feel secure." That sounds like an excuse. It's not. It's an explanation. There's a difference. Is there? "Yeah, an excuse is saying I can't help it. That's just how I am. An explanation is saying this is why I did it, and now I have to work on fixing it." I leaned back in my chair, looking out the cafe window at the empty street. "Your father used to say things like that," I said. "He'd explain his drinking, explain why he couldn't keep a job, explain everything, except how he was going to actually change. And he never did. He died drunk and bitter and alone." "I don't want to be like him." "Then don't be. But understand something, Daniel. I spent 40 years trying to save your father from himself, and it didn't work. I'm not doing that again. Not for you, not for anyone. If you want to change, you change. If you don't, that's your choice. But I'm done sacrificing myself on the altar of other people's potential. I'm not asking you to save me." "Good, because I won't." We sat in silence for a moment. Then Daniel said, "Can I tell you something?" "Sure." "Being in here, it's given me time to think. Really think, without all the noise and pressure and Carla in my ear telling me we deserved more than we had. And I've been thinking about all the times you helped me, all the money, all the sacrifice, and I realized something." "What?" "I never once said thank you, not really. I just kept asking for more, like it was owed to me." His voice cracked. "You were a good mom. You worked 2 jobs to keep us fed when Dad was drinking. You helped me with homework. You showed up to my school events, even when you were exhausted. You loved me, and I treated that love like it was worthless." I felt tears sliding down my face. "I can't go back and fix what I did," Daniel continued. "I can't give you back those years or that money or your peace of mind, but I can say thank you now. Thank you for everything you did for me, even though I didn't deserve it. Thank you for being strong enough to hold me accountable, and thank you for not giving up on Sophia and Tommy, even after what we put you through." "I love those kids," I said. "That was never in question." "I know, but you could have walked away. You would have been justified. Instead, you showed them what real love looks like, the kind that sets boundaries and demands better and sticks around anyway." We talked for another 20 minutes. About his therapy, about Carla's visits with the kids, about what his life might look like when he got out. When we finally hung up, I sat in the quiet cafe and let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. Grief for the family I'd wanted but never had. Relief that I'd survived and built something new. Hope that maybe, just maybe, the people who'd hurt me were actually trying to become better. And acceptance that I might never know for sure, and that was okay. 3 years after that birthday party, Sophia turned 16. She'd asked if we could celebrate at the cafe, just the two of us, and I'd agreed. I made her favorite cake, chocolate with raspberry filling, and closed the cafe early so we could have privacy. She showed up right on time, looking so much older than the 11-year-old who'd thrown juice on me. Taller, more confident, carrying herself with a grace that reminded me of my mother. "Happy birthday," I said, setting the cake on the table. "Thank you, Grandma." She looked around the cafe, which I decorated with streamers and balloons. "You didn't have to do all this." I wanted to. We ate cake and talked about school, about her friends, about the colleges she was starting to look at. She was smart, had gotten straight A's despite everything she'd been through, and she had dreams of becoming a lawyer. "I want to help people who can't help themselves," she said, "like you did with all those other people Dad and Mom stole from. That's a good dream." "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," she said carefully, "about the birthday party, about everything. And I wanted you to know, I'm not going to be like them. I'm not going to use people or take advantage or think money is more important than relationships. I know you're not." "How do you know?" I looked at her, this young woman who'd been given every excuse to become bitter and broken, who'd instead chosen to grow and learn and become better. "Because you keep showing up," I said, "because you do your homework at that table every week, even though you could study anywhere, because you call on my birthday and ask how I'm doing and actually listen to the answer, because you're not just saying you're different, you're proving it." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "I'm scared I'll mess up, that I'll make the same mistakes they did." "You might. We all mess up sometimes. The question is what you do after. Do you blame everyone else, or do you take responsibility and try to do better?" "The second one. Then you'll be fine." We finished our cake and I gave her my gift, a leather journal with her initials embossed on the cover. "For college applications and beyond," I said, "write your story, the real one, not the one your parents tried to write for you." She hugged me tight. "I love you, Grandma." "I love you too, sweetheart." After she left, I cleaned up the cafe and thought about how strange redemption is. Not the Hollywood version where everyone forgives and forgets and lives happily ever after, but the real kind. The messy, complicated kind, where some relationships heal and others don't, where forgiveness is conditional and trust is rebuilt slowly, where happy endings are really just new beginnings. Daniel got out of prison 6 months after Sophia's birthday. He called me from a halfway house, told me he had a job at a warehouse, that he was going to AA meetings and therapy twice a week. "Can I see you?" he asked. "Maybe come by the cafe." "Not yet," I said. "Maybe someday, but not yet." He didn't argue, just said, "Okay, I understand." Carla kept her promise. Every month, a check for $200 appeared in Patricia's office, deposited into the escrow account. It would take her 20 years to pay back what she'd stolen, maybe longer, but she was trying. Tommy started visiting the cafe again around his 13th birthday. He was quieter than his sister, more damaged by everything that had happened, but he was trying too. We'd sit in comfortable silence while he did homework, and sometimes he'd ask me questions about business or cooking or life. "Do you hate my parents?" he asked me one day. "No," I said truthfully. "I hate what they did, but I don't hate them." "Do you love them?" "I love who they could be if they keep working on themselves. I'm not sure I love who they were." He thought about that for a long time. "That makes sense," he said finally. Margaret and I expanded the cafe after 3 years, bought the space next door, knocked down a wall, added more seating, and a small stage for open mic nights. The art classes with Rachel had evolved into a weekly painting group that met at the cafe. My paintings were still terrible, but I'd stopped caring. I painted because it made me happy, not because I needed to be good at it. Helen from Florida came to visit once. We spent a whole day together, two women who'd been victimized by the same people who'd found their way through to the other side. Do you regret it? She asked me over coffee. Reporting them? Going through all of that? Every day, I said, and never both at the same time. I understand that. The thing nobody tells you about standing up for yourself, I said, is that it doesn't erase the pain. It doesn't undo the damage. It just means you stop letting other people damage you. Is that enough? It has to be. 4 years after opening Second Chances, the cafe won a local award for Best Small Business. They interviewed me for the newspaper, asked me about my success. I didn't tell them about Daniel or Carla or the fraud. That wasn't their story to print, and I was tired of being defined by my trauma. Instead, I talked about the cafe, about the community we'd built, about second chances and what they really mean. A second chance isn't about forgetting what happened, I said. It's about choosing who you want to be next, regardless of who you were before. The article ran with a photo of me standing in front of the cafe, smiling. I looked old. I was 70 now. With deep lines on my face and grey hair, I'd finally stopped dying. But I also looked happy. I kept that article on the wall behind the register, right next to Sophia's first report card, with all A's and a terrible painting I'd done of a sunset that looked more like a muddy puddle. They were proof. Not that my life was perfect, it wasn't. Not that I'd forgiven everyone who'd hurt me, I hadn't. But that I'd survived, that I'd built something good, that I'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to me and turned it into a beginning instead of an ending. On my 70th birthday, Margaret threw me a party at the cafe. Sophia and Tommy came. Some of the regulars, Rachel and her art students, the librarians from my old job. Even Patricia showed up, bringing a bottle of wine and a card that said, "To the bravest client I've ever had." We ate cake and told stories, and I looked around at these people, my chosen family, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Contentment. Not happiness exactly. Happiness is too fragile, too dependent on circumstances outside your control. But contentment. The knowledge that I'd done everything I could with what I'd been given. That I'd fought when I needed to fight and let go when I needed to let go. That I'd built a life worth living, even if it looked nothing like the life I'd imagined when I was young. Late that night, after everyone had gone home, I sat alone in the cafe with a cup of tea and thought about everything that had brought me to this moment. The birthday party where it all started, the courthouse battles, the bankruptcy and the prison sentences, and the slow, painful work of rebuilding. The cafe, with its books and its coffee and its community of broken people finding their way toward wholeness. Sophia and Tommy, growing up scarred but not broken, learning from their parents' mistakes instead of repeating them. Daniel and Carla, somewhere out there trying to become people they should have been all along. And me, Eleanor Price, 70 years old, owner of a small cafe, part-time painter, survivor. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Hi Mom, this is Daniel. I know you said not yet, but I wanted you to know I've been sober for 2 years, working the same job, going to therapy. Carla and I are separated, but we're both doing better. The kids are doing well. I don't know if you'll ever want to see me again, but I'm here if you do. And either way, thank you for everything. For holding me accountable, for not giving up on my kids, for showing me what strength really looks like. I love you." I read the message 3 times. Then I set my phone down and looked out at the quiet street, thinking about forgiveness and second chances and whether some bridges can ever be rebuilt. I didn't know the answer. Maybe there wasn't one, but I knew this. I'd spent too many years being defined by other people's choices, by my husband's drinking, by Daniel's greed, by Carla's manipulation. Now I got to define myself. And whoever I chose to be, whatever relationships I chose to rebuild or leave broken, that was up to me. Not because I owed anyone anything. Not because family is supposed to forgive. Not because bitterness is bad or grace is good or any of the 1,000 platitudes people throw at you when you've been hurt, but because I'd earned the right to choose, I'd fought for it, bled for it, built an entire new life on the foundation of that choice, and that was enough. I finished my tea, turned off the lights, and locked up the cafe. Tomorrow I'd open again, serve coffee, chat with regulars, maybe work on another terrible painting. Tomorrow I might text Daniel back, or I might not. Tomorrow I'd keep building this life I'd created from the ruins of the one I'd lost. But tonight I just went home, to my small house with its peeling paint and creaky floors, to my bed where I slept alone but not lonely, to a life that was mine, finally and completely mine, and that was more than enough. That was everything.